People love that kind of stuff. It's, I mean, people will go to people will look like where
one son
yeah,
brother and my niece and nephew. So my brother and I played catch on field.
yeah, this guy Tristan Walsh, who's a
Good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order, and I guess I'm going to use the microphone here so we have a little bit more audible capability here. Today is Wednesday, August 11th. It's 11:01, and this is a meeting of the Assembly's Public Safety Committee. We have quite a full agenda today, so bear with us as we try to get through most of this. But Ms. Honest, if you could do the roll call for us, please, and make sure that we're recording. Thank you.
Ms. Allen? Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Salatop? Here. Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Perez-Uriel?
Here. Sure.
Ms. LaFrance?
She's going to be here shortly, but she's not here yet.
Oh, Ms. Quindy?
She's around, but she's not in the room yet.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are joined with lots of other people with us today, and some will be presenting in that. And I just ask that you introduce yourself for the record when you're speaking, but I don't think we're going to really go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. First up, we have the Anchorage Police Department. And looks like we've got quite a cadre here, so all of you are more than welcome to join us up here. And there is one mic there that you might want to pass around, the smaller one, and that will help with those that are trying to hear here in this room. Thank you.
Yeah, the larger one is the media one, so you'll want to use this small one here. Yeah.
And Chief McCoy, thank you, and just take it away and introduce as necessary. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Chief McCoy, APD. I have with me this morning Deputy Chief Curl, Captain Tate, and Blair Christensen from the legal department. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our update on body-worn cameras. So body-worn cameras. The most important aspect of implementing the body-worn camera policy has been how we're going to govern that technology. And my goal from the beginning was to be open and transparent about the process, allowing input from the public to ensure that the policy instills trust and accountability while meeting our operational needs and protecting my officers. So we published our first draft policy back in February. And we then hosted and participated in 2 public listening sessions, one on June 16th and the other on August 4th. And the goals of the listening sessions were to allow the public an opportunity to share with us their thoughts, their concerns, and their expectations. In addition to the listening sessions, I've received a great amount of feedback through one-on-one conversations with members of the community, with meetings with various community groups and organizations, and I'm pleased with the feedback we've received. And through that process, we've identified 3 major areas of public interest. The first area is the release of video to the public. The second area is when will officers activate and deactivate the cameras? And the third is, will officers be allowed to review their videos? So my team has evaluated that feedback and has been working to incorporate elements of that within the policy. And my hope for today was to provide you with a second draft that showed some real movement towards that. However, we've run into some concerns that were brought to our attention by the legal department, and we've been working to try to get through those all the way up until yesterday. And we were unable to get the movement that I would like to see. The concerns are primarily related to privacy laws and the additional protections related to privacy here in Alaska. And so until we resolve those privacy concerns, I cannot move forward with the next draft policy. We will continue to work on it and provide you with updates on that. And I intend to have another update on August 18th at the Public Safety Advisory Commission. However, as I stated, at this point, there are some real concerns that were brought to us related to privacy, and in good conscience, I can't move forward with the next draft without resolving some of those issues. So again, I have my team here with me. Blair Christensen from the legal department is here. If there are questions related to privacy that we can try to answer. But again, I made a commitment to the public that we would listen, and the feedback that I received really is relating to overall concerns about releasing policy, or excuse me, releasing video footage and so forth. And until we address these privacy concerns, I can't make any real movement on that. And I feel I owe it to the public to resolve that and then provide a policy that at least addresses a large percentage of the feedback we've received.
Thank you, Chief. I just want to point out first, we've been joined by Assembly Member Suzanne LaFrance and Assembly Member Austin Quinn Davidson, and I do believe we have a question for you from Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the privacy concerns, as you're looking to address them, are you looking at them solely from a legal perspective, but also from a technology perspective? I've recently learned that different software capabilities or hardware capabilities allow for faster, more specific redactions. So what's the resolution mechanisms in play?
So through the chair, Ms. Zolotel, the concerns that have caused pause for us are primarily legal concerns. We can work through the technology issues, and there will be different capabilities of whatever system we end up purchasing. But really everything hinges right now on the interpretation of the law and what we will be allowed to release to the public.
Follow up? Yes. And is that being evaluated with and without redaction, and the application of those technologies, though, over whatever potential circumstances might arise? Because it seems like a lot of the inquiries will be very fact-based. And so, again, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what the concern, I guess the concern hasn't been fully stated as exactly what it is. So I'm just trying to, and I don't know if you want to tell us the exact concern or not, and then the ways that can move forward.
Through the chair, go ahead. This is Assistant Municipal Attorney Blair Christensen. So the concerns are, I think there's a variety of concerns. Right now we're researching whether videotaping in certain circumstances is violative of the Fourth Amendment. We're researching whether redaction would be sufficient to cover all the privacy concerns. I would say, like, hypothetically, I think some of the feedback we've gotten is that they would like release a video for in-custody deaths. Not all in-custody deaths are the use of force, right? People have medical events. You could die of an epileptic seizure, a heart attack, things like that. And so some sort of blanket rule that we'd be able to release all of those videos, I just think is not going to be probably possible in Alaska, because those individuals do have privacy rights to that information. And so we're kind of looking at all of those things right now.
Mr. Dunbar.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask a couple of follow-ups to that? And actually, your answer kind of raised a couple more questions for me. So first of all, I don't fully understand why the Fourth Amendment would be implicated here in a way that it is in other jurisdictions. You know, these are common systems elsewhere. On the other hand, I know that Alaska we're one of 5 states with an explicit privacy amendment in our Constitution. And so I'm wondering what the implications of the state constitutional provision is rather than the federal Fourth Amendment. And then when you talk about privacy rights, are you talking about the rights of the accused, or in some cases the deceased? Or are you talking about the rights of, for example, a homeowner, or the rights of the people who are the incidental, in the footage? Or are you even talking about the privacy rights of the officer? So could you give me a little more details about whose privacy rights you're talking about?
To the chair, Mr. Dummer, we are thinking about all of those concerns. Certainly decedents, privacy interests, officers may have privacy rights in certain situations. Bystanders might have privacy interests. Certainly in the home in Alaska, there's a very large privacy interest in the home and what kind of video recording we would be allowed to do in there. I think as to your Fourth Amendment question, certainly other jurisdictions have done it, but there is a line of Ninth Circuit cases that says the method of the search, if it's more intrusive, it can be certain types of searches can be more intrusive than others. And video and audio recording has been called out by the Ninth Circuit multiple times as being more intrusive than other kinds of searches. And so we have to ensure that we're looking at all of those things and we're implementing this in a way that's going to be constitutional and follow Alaska laws and all of those things.
And the question about the Alaska state constitutional provision, had other states are there any other jurisdictions that have a similar, because I think there are 5, similar amendment that have adopted dead body cam policies and hasn't implicated that provision at all?
So through the chair, Alaska, in my research, Alaska has one of the strongest privacy constitutional provisions in the whole country, if not the strongest, right? It started with Raven and has moved forward from there. And I think it's fair to say that we probably have the strongest privacy laws in the country. And so it's hard to look at other states that release everything. I was just looking at something in New Mexico the other day where they release everything, but their privacy laws are not anywhere close to what ours are, right? And so it's difficult to make those kinds of comparisons because very few states have the level of privacy protections that we have.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So can you speak a little bit to kind of really in terms of how we now begin to really reconcile this? What's really the process for moving forward and making these decisions and coming up with final decisions on what our policy, on what the privacy laws really should look like and how it will affect the body cam policy?
Madam Chair, so I think what we're currently doing is that legal is taking a hard look at it. We are doing lots and lots of research. Me and Pam Weiss, who's in the audience, have been working on this quite a bit to try to figure out, we are looking at what all the other states have done. We are looking at potential ways to resolve things. And I think our next step is sitting down with APD and trying to work through all those issues and trying to figure out how we can write the policy in a way that addresses public concerns, but is still within the confines of the law.
And a time frame maybe for that? Do you have thought about?
Madam Chair, this is something that's been ongoing for us and we're having daily conversations. So again, my goal would be to have some type of update at the next Public Safety Advisory Commission meeting on the 18th. So as you've heard this morning, it's complicated issues for us, and I've heard the public loud and clear of what they would like to see out of this policy, and that's my intent, is to work with legal to see if there is some common ground we can come to meet that expectation. But it's very complicated, and it will not be easy to fully provide everything to everyone, but we're going to do the best we can.
Appreciate that. I know we're all just looking for hard answers, so thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
So what are so you have privacy and then the redaction. What's the technology on them? Videos, so if you're in the home, just do audio and you don't have the video, can you easily block out other sections? I mean, just, it seems like technology's there where you can just focus on, show the individual and not show the background. You can do it on Zoom, you can add the background. So, or those technologies not there?
So through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, I believe the technology is available. However, there are just many different layers and facets to this. So for instance, if we videotape an incident involving a person, say we redacted and blur their face out, is that enough? Is that person still going to be able to be identified by their neighbors and associates? And those are the types of questions. Did we truly protect their privacy just by redacting the face? You know, the location that it's filmed from could give away detail of who the person's identity is. So those are the types of concerns that we're trying to navigate through. I think the technology will be able to do whatever we like. It's just a matter of being able to make sure the policy fits within the law, and then the technology will follow.
All right, thanks.
Ms. Solito, thanks. If this is going a little bit from the policy back over to the appropriation, can you give us an update of kind of where you're at with the, the other tech upgrades that are going on to support body worn cameras when the time is to bring them on?
So we're still in the process of, we have the body cameras, we've identified, we just put in for a grant. We have Proposition 4, which gives us part of the technology. We're going through CAT RMS upgrade. We've narrowed that down to 3 vendors. We want the body cameras to be able to integrate with CAT RMS. Once we narrow the CAT RMS down to a sole source, then we'll go, of course, down to the body cameras. We'll see, we'll put that out for RFP or a sole source, depending on what we deem is best for the department and for the citizens of Anchorage. So we're looking at everything. Our IT manager is working diligently on this. Everything's in place to go forward. We just need to make sure that we have a policy, and we have our biggest priority is CAT RMS. That's our number one, but body cameras is right there, and that's going to be able to tie in with our CAT RMS system as well.
So is it a fair characterization that the infrastructure is being laid so that when the policy is ready, we're going to be ready to
Yes.
go? Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I'm hearing, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You're not ready to move forward with the next round of policy development until you've settled on legal questions that are before you. That doesn't change the fact that we are on a trajectory to getting this work done.
That's absolutely correct. And I just want to reiterate that, again, this is not us trying to not move forward with this. My instructions to our team is, I want us to look at this from a perspective of how can we release video to the public versus how can we not. And that's how we're looking at this, because that's the feedback we receive. The public has an expectation that there's going to be some level of access to seeing the video footage, and we've been working through that lens. How can we provide the public with access? And there are some challenges in front of us. We're going to keep working towards resolving those, but we're still moving down this path.
For my part, getting it right is better than getting it fast.
I agree.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have 2 questions related to the Public Safety Advisory Commission. So first, I know that you are receiving a number of comments and information from the public. Is the Public Safety Advisory Commission getting access to that information? And then second, I think it's a desire from this body, it has been going all the way back to when the current municipal manager was on the body, on the assembly, that we want the PSAC to be more than just the rubber stamp. That we want them actually involved in policy creation and advisement. And so I'm wondering, to what degree are they being integrated in the process of developing this policy?
So through the chair, Mr. Dunbar. So our second listening session was hosted by the PSAC, and we participated in that. So we definitely wanted a collaborative approach with them in getting information. And so I think with us both being at the table, we were receiving the same feedback. We have open lines of communication with them. I know Captain Case has a direct line to members of the PSAC. So we are sharing information. We're receiving a lot of the same information. And I think we're all in alignment as far as what we want to see from the policy and what the public expects. And again, today, I was hopeful that I was going to be able to present a policy, a draft policy today with some real movement. So the public could see that, wow, they're listening, they're moving towards a policy that we can all have faith and trust in, and that we feel holds law enforcement accountable, while at the same time providing us with the necessary tools to fulfill our mission. So I'll admit, I am somewhat disappointed we're not here yet, but I think we will get there. And it's just a matter of us continuing to work together on these issues. Members of the PSAC are able to meet with us and collaborate with us on these very difficult issues. I'd love to sit down and hear their perspective more on the privacy concerns, which is something that we haven't actually had a conversation, a detailed conversation with them about. But these are very real issues that we have to resolve before we can move forward any further. But again, we want this to be a collaborative approach with our commissions, with the community, and other groups throughout the city.
And just on that first question, is there any information that APD is receiving that PSAC isn't receiving?
We're really, the only thing they haven't received would be the one-on-one conversations that I've had with various community members and community groups. But the information that's being echoed to me in those chambers is pretty much the same information that we're hearing throughout the listening sessions. But I'd be happy to share those conversations with them. Obviously they're not documented conversations, but it's just one-on-one conversations that members of the community have personally reached out to me at different venues and settings to express their view on body-worn cameras and what they'd like to see. And again, it's really just reinforces what we've received publicly, and just lets me know we're on the right path. It's just, okay, we have to get through these issues before we can truly publish them.
Okay, great, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple questions, then a couple comments. So first, so last week at the listening session, which I was at, you had stated the intent of having the draft policy released here, and I totally understand why that wasn't possible. I'm just curious, was there a deadline that you had in mind in terms of the public being able to comment? And with not being able to get the next draft policy out, are you looking at extending that deadline?
Through the chair, Mr. Rivera, so I don't have a hard deadline. So what my intent moving forward would be is to resolve these issues. Once resolved, we will issue a draft policy, and then we will have an opportunity for the public to provide feedback on that next draft. And so the reason I didn't set hard deadlines at the beginning of this is for this very reason. We've come to a roadblock that it's going to take some time to resolve. And so once resolved, we'll set the next date. And again, that was intentional at the beginning, why I didn't set deadlines, because I knew there would be some challenges we would have to overcome.
Great, thank you. Next question I have is for the committee chairs. So I think, one of the things that we had talked about in prior public safety committees is the opportunity for us to review the policy whenever it's sort of as close to final as possible, and seeing if there are avenues for the assembly to engage in this in a more formal way, like some type of resolution that goes to the body. So I'm wondering, obviously that opportunity isn't today, right, for us to review that. Is there a plan to create a space where this is sort of the sole topic? Because I could imagine this could take a while, and if you look at today's agenda, right, we wouldn't have the time to do it today. So is there a plan of the committee leadership for us to create that space?
I don't think we've actually had that conversation. We're still kind of waiting to, just with the process of the draft to begin with. But I think we've been pretty flexible on this committee in terms of being able to, kind of do the next thing, whatever that is, kind of month by month. We meet a couple weeks before each meeting, make sure we have things on the agenda that need to be on the agenda. So I'm sure we can do that too. But, you know, this could also be something that needs a work session, you know, just something outside of this committee. So I think we can monitor that.
Okay, I would agree. I think the work session, and my intention, I've had a conversation early on about the process, and the intention was to get to a stage where we had heard from the community, where there had been a variety of opportunities for the community to come forward and bring their thoughts for APD to work through the versions of this and work through legal and bring it to us, you know, in a near close to being done state, so that we can review it and really have a conversation about it and then give our feedback towards it. And I think a work session is probably the right way to do that, so that we can have a full hour or hour and a half to work through it. So we can work on planning that and then schedule it with APD so it's in line with their timeline as well.
Great, thank you. And then just a couple quick comments. So as I understand it, the chair of the Public Safety Advisory Commission couldn't be here today. So she wanted me to pass on a couple of things. First, and the chief has already stated this a couple of times already, the Public Safety Advisory Commission has another listening session planned on next week on August 18th at the AFD Training Center from 6 to 7 p.m. So hopefully folks in our community can attend. And then second is actually very much in line with the comment just made by the chair. The Public Safety Advisory Commission extended an invitation at last week's listening session to have some type of joint work session between the commission and this committee or the body as a whole to delve into the work collaboratively and possibly sort of help break down the policy to make it easier to understand for the public. So if there's already a plan for a work session, I think it'd be great to invite the commission to join us.
Thank you. And, you know, and I guess I just want to comment too, and I would say that I think there's been some frustration about some of our process, and we heard a little bit about that at the Public Safety Advisory Commission's public hearing last week. And there was a lot of interest in commenting and having a lot of public input before a draft even got developed. And then there's been criticism that we've been having public comment without a draft being available to comment on. So it was kind of like you couldn't win either way. But I think what it speaks to is the fact that word is getting around and more community members are becoming aware, and they do have opinions, we know they do. But I know APD is taking the time to take those opinions. There are other committees or commissions like the Public Safety Advisory Commission that's trying to do their part too. And I think we'll see more of that gel, particularly right now. The hiccup seems to be the legal part of it. So, you know, we're just working through everything as best we can and obviously as quickly as we can. And then I think once we do have that more solid policy, then we'll be able to really focus. And so I think we will have that opportunity then to have the work session. So don't say that it's scheduled yet, because it's not. But anyway, but we're getting there. So anyway. Any other comments, questions on body cam policy at this point? So, I don't hear any, but Chief McCoy, you had a couple of other things that we kind of wanted to go over. So we put the navigation center on there. Several of us got the opportunity to tour the navigation center potential site, basically the evidence lot. And thank you so much, Deputy Chief Curl, for orchestrating that for all of us. But I just thought if there was anything else you wanted to add to that conversation at this point, you know, please feel free to do so. And we may have some questions.
Sure, thank you. So I'm pleased that you were able to tour the lot with us. And truly, questions regarding the navigation center may be better suited for the administration. However, my team has been meeting with the administration and the purchasing department to discuss the details of acquiring a new facility for our approximately 500 evidence vehicles. And that's an ongoing process. However, for me, public safety is a priority, and we will do whatever it takes for the well-being of this community. And if that means we have to move our evidence lot, we will. My only ask is that we ensure that our new facility meets all of the security requirements that we need to secure the evidence, maintain that chain of custody. But again, for me, it's all about public safety. And if we as a community feel the best use of that land is for a navigation center, we're all in, and we will make that happen. We just need to properly secure our evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Solotel? Thank you. So I did get an opportunity to tour. There's a lot of evidentiary cars there in various states of repose. And so logistically, even if we were to create a lot, I think, you know, what kind of timeline is realistic? I mean, just assuming the lot's been created, it's all ready to go. How long does it take to move that much evidence in a way that protects the chain of custody and all the things you need to do to ensure that you're very responsible with that?
So through the chair, Ms. Saltel, we think we could get it done in about a week. It would require us to acquire a fleet of tow trucks, and we will have to escort the vehicles one by one from our lot to the new facility. But again, we can make that happen. We just, you know, obviously need the appropriate resources in forms of tow trucks and escort vehicles to make that occur. And, you know, again, these are evidence vehicles, so there's a requirement for us to maintain full chain of custody, and that's why officers would have to escort the tow trucks as we move from one facility to the next. And we would do that 500 times until we're moved.
Thank you. And apologies for the record. Ms. Allard has joined us a few minutes ago, and I did not notice that in a timely way, but anyway. Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Constant, you had a question.
Thanks. Maybe it's more of a comment. I don't see anyone from the 8th floor here. My biggest concern about the moving of evidence to the new proposed site is the fact that that site has been identified for a comprehensive neighborhood redevelopment and a rezone that would provide hundreds of units of housing and a grocery store to a food desert. And so I'm afraid a short-term solution at that site creates a major detriment to the community. And so I'm hopeful that we have some alternative sites that people are looking at, because anything within the middle of that Tudor and Elmore complex would scuttle a major redevelopment plan that at this time doesn't have the money behind it to build it, but we've been doing major investment work to get it ready and get it there. And so I have some substantial concerns about lot number 2 as opposed to the first lot. So really, it's not for you, it's for whoever's listening. I see that there is one person here from close to the 8th floor. My concerns are that we don't want to destroy the possibility of hundreds of units of housing in a grocery store for a short-term effort to move.
I don't see any other questions on this topic, but something on a lighter note and more cheerful note, maybe. We've marked this year as the 100th anniversary of the Anchorage Police Department, and we just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about how that might be being celebrated in the community. So events, programs, announcements.
Great, so thank you, and I'm just truly thankful to live in a community that is celebrating their police department. And so we fully intend to have a community celebration. That's something that our community relations team is working on with different community groups and organizations. And we hope to be able to put something together and announce it soon. But we really would like to have a community-wide celebration. And again, it's something that is really humbling to us to have a community that's rallying behind us this way and wants to celebrate with us our 100th year anniversary. So we definitely want to partake in that and have the community come together with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? What somebody's? Yeah, I got it. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being with us, Anchorage Police Department, and we'll shift gears here to the Anchorage Fire Department. And while Chief Schrodi's getting up here, you all have a handout from AFD, and there should be others back there on the table for anybody else in the public that wants to look at this too. And welcome, Chief Schrodi. I asked him if he wanted to do the PowerPoint on the overhead, but we figured we could just flip pages, so hopefully everybody's okay with that. But anyway, so we have all kinds of things that you have to share with us, so just go ahead and take it away, Chief.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. And it's my privilege to be here speaking to you about these things. I will move quickly, and so please interrupt me if you want to stop me for any questions. I keep a list of issues that have been raised by this body that I need to be responsive to, and so I'm going to address the MCT update. I'm going to address a question raised about beetle kill prioritization for mitigation efforts. And I'm going to respond to questions about the traffic signal at Fire Station 3. You had also previously, this body has raised questions to me about our recruiting efforts. We do have recruitment coming up in the fall. That's not on our agenda, but if there's time, I'll just briefly talk about that. And then the fifth item that will that I'll plan to cover with you in the future has to do with our crowdsourcing CPR app efforts. So with that, turning to slide 2. So first, the Mobile Integrated Health Program is, as you know, but for the benefit of people who may be listening, consists of 2 components: our mobile crisis team and our community outreach and education referral service called the core team. So addressing first the mobile crisis team, we are on track to full implementation. We're at phase 1. I do want to apologize by calling out the typo in the very second word on this page in that table. We have hired most of the staff that have been authorized under this phase. That includes our administrative assistant, two paramedics, 2 mental health clinicians who are execs. Still on the docket are the program coordinator and the 2 clinician ones, which will be case managers. Those are held up somewhat going through the classification process, and we haven't yet recruited for them. But other than that, implementation is going along swimmingly. We've provided training to the MCT, as well as we're currently in process of providing de-escalation training to all of our firefighters and paramedics and EMTs. So you can see there are other items there. Right now, we're expecting next week to go to 7-day-a-week staffing. Currently, as of today, we're 5 days a week. And then by mid-October, we're expecting to be in 24/7 operation. In the 17 or so day period, the pilot program, turning to the next slide, or next page, 17 or so partial days, we responded to 27 calls, or 12 partial or full shifts, 27 calls. The vast majority of those interactions were able to remain in the community. They weren't transported. 4 of them were transported to the emergency department for coexisting medical conditions, and 1 was transported for a psychiatric evaluation. Do you want me to pause for a question?
I was gonna say, Chief, if you don't mind, we're starting to stack up a little bit here. Mr. Constant?
So my question actually relates to when you get, I think, to the column 3. On your slide that you just moved down, you have staffing, implementation, design, and development. I'm assuming design and development is something that's kind of happening now and also will be happening in the near future.
Yes, sir. It is in progress. QA and QI, so quality assurance and quality improvement, are ongoing. We're updating our policies and procedures to reflect the current practices. Billing process, I think, is mostly in place. Collaboration is ongoing. Go collaborating on.
Hold on that one. That was the point I wanted to talk about, the collaborating with stakeholders. So I had long conversations with Chief Hetrick about the importance of connecting with certain community groups who have experience, kind of the PhD level experience in neighborhood trauma. And those are community councils and neighborhood groups like my friends at Third Avenue Radicals who've had this dynamic swirling around them for decades and who might have some very valid input for how this work could go, separate from the clinical piece, which is an important piece unto itself, but it never really happened. And so I'm hoping at some point we can prioritize an effort to do some critical outreach, maybe to the Midtown folks, maybe to the Third Avenue folks, maybe around 13th and Gamble, who experience a lot of this activity around them and are finding themselves without a place to turn. So I'm hoping that we can build that back into the concept at some point soon.
Your comment is appreciated. Unfortunately, I don't know specifically who they've met with and who they haven't. I'll ensure that we do.
Mr. Weddleton, I saw your hand up, but was Ms. LaFrance, was yours up as well? Okay, Mr. Weddleton, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So looking at the schedule, starting mid-August, which is about now, 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So was it teams of two split up and you have overlap? Is that the critical time? When do people have worse mental health problems? When it's midnight?
Yes, sir. That is precisely it. So they are teams of two. We have a paramedic and a clinician in the car, and they are responding to calls in two ways. One is they are listening to calls and triaging them themselves. So if they hear an ambulance dispatch to a call that they think might be one of these calls, they will self-dispatch. Our dispatchers are also triaging the calls and trying to ascertain if this is a potential MCT call. And if they deem that it is, they will dispatch the MCT unit directly. As to the hours, yes, these are the hours when we think that most of these cases present, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. By this time next week, we'll be 7 days a week, and then sometime in October, we expect to go 24 hours around the clock.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. I have two clarifying questions, Chief. So in the second column here, you talk about AFD dispatching a limited number of calls. We know that sort of AFD does dispatching for everyone, but are some of these calls actually APD calls, or is it all AFD calls at this point?
Well, these are calls that if it's a 911 call, it would come through the police dispatch center first, and then be transferred to us if they recognize that it belongs to us. So by that time, they would have had the opportunity to address it if it was a police call.
Okay. And then related to that, on the second bullet point on the second slide, you say 80% of contact stations use referrals. Is there any way to know sort of what the delta is between that and had MCT not existed? So do we know how many of those would have been transported but for the MCT? Is there any way for you to estimate that?
I can give you an educated guess. I don't know the number precisely. I would say nearly 100% of those would have gone to the emergency department.
Okay, I mean that's a huge measure of success if we know that. Right, that these would have gone to emergency department and probably cost somebody, I'm not sure even who, somebody a lot more money, and perhaps had a worse outcome than being able to stay in the community like this. So I'd say that's a very encouraging number. Yeah, look forward to the program expanding. Thank you.
Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you. So those that weren't able to be resolved in the community, what was the mobile crisis team able to simply, were they able to simply drop the individual off, particularly the psychiatric ER, or were they required to stay? Because we've heard previously where, and my understanding is that the psychiatric emergency rooms are on the verge right now, that we kind of get in this endless loop of folks just getting stuck in the back of a vehicle So can you talk a little bit about what the experience has been so far?
Yes. So, first of all, when an emergency department goes on divert status, if we need to bring the patient there, we'll bring the patient over their objections, and they'll accept the patient. So 4 of the, what I think I said, 27, 4 of the 27 that were transferred to the ED presented with medical conditions that needed to go to the emergency department. Just 1 of them was not considered a medical problem, but strictly a psychiatric problem, and they went to the psych ED. Before, we would have just taken, we only had 1 option, they would all go to the emergency department.
And so, when the transfer to the psych ED was just simply just as smooth as the medical transfer in this experience, or I guess if we don't know, could we find out? Because we've heard before that there's been problems with just simply letting someone off at the psych ED and transferring that, custody and care just over to the hospital, that there's been some tension there.
Thank you. I've not been given any reason to think it wasn't, but I'll find out. I don't specifically know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
I think Mr. Dunbar actually asked a question I was gonna ask, and that's essentially, Chief, what you suggested was that for EMS calls, you had these things. My question really was, but what about all those other calls that are coming into APD? And so, but what I understand from your response is those are monitored, and if they fit, they come to you.
That's right.
Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think going off of the question that Mr. Dunbar asked, so I'm wondering if at some point, after a certain amount of time, whenever it makes sense, there's going to be some type of cost benefit analysis where we can really look at and put sort of a dollar figure of, because of this program in place, we've saved to the municipality X amount of millions of dollars. Because I think it'll help us as policymakers make wise decisions sort of going into the future of how we want to continue funding this program or not.
Yes, you have my commitment to do that.
Okay. All right, looks like we're ready to move on. Thank you.
If I might, Mary, please.
Okay.
I just want to speak to the idea of offsetting the expenses that Felix, that you just suggested. We are going to reduce expenses. What that's going to do, I think, is going to fill gaps in services that have been missing because we haven't had the staff to do those other services. But I don't anticipate a substantial reduction in actual budgeted costs. I just expect a higher level of service to be delivered. And so it'll be nice to see that offset, but I'm hopeful that we recognize kind of broadly that this isn't going to bring down the cost of this line of staffing or that line of department, or it might, but I think mostly it's going to provide better service broadly to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Anything else, Mr. Rivera?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
All right, thank you, and yes, please proceed.
Okay, so you can see on this page in front of you that there are, our average response time was 12.5 minutes. There are some outliers that have driven that number up. We think the number is actually lower. So for example, there was one call that was, came in and it was categorized as a COVID welfare check and a non-urgent call that they sat on for 2 hours. So we think the response times are much better than that. Couple of success stories here. Just one, we had the report of subject that jumped out of a moving vehicle, and our MCT self-dispatched to that call because they could identify that it was a person in crisis. And they were, in so doing, were able to free up the ambulance that was also responding to that scene. Because the ambulance was freed up, they subsequently went to a cardiac arrest very nearby and had a return of spontaneous circulation. So that's a situation where, because this MCT was in service, a different patient may very well be alive today that wouldn't otherwise be. We haven't, I'm not yet able to tell you what it's costing in terms of personnel costs for a couple of reasons. One is we haven't filled all the positions. We're using paramedics and personnel that are current employees of the fire department who are filling in these unfilled roles on the MCT. So we haven't yet been able to cleanly identify the personnel costs we've expended so far. But we'll have that to you shortly. What we do have are all the other hard expenses, which you can see right there.
Chief, I have a question for you then. Just in line with this, and dealing with wages and making these hiring decisions and that, how difficult is it right now to hire qualified people? Do we have a good pool out there, or are we kind of like in the whole healthcare conundrum with being able to hire enough qualified individuals?
Thank you for that question. It's a good question. I don't exactly know, but we're surmising a couple of things. One is the way classification, the way the clinician ones were classified to begin with. They came in based on our description of the work that they would be performing, came back at a range 17 with a registered nurse. We think that that's more than what is needed to do this case management. So we're working with classification to draw that down to a lower, less expensive level. So we haven't recruited for those positions yet, but we do think it would be hard to get RNs to take this position. So that again is an ongoing process.
Makes sense to me. Thank you. Anybody?
Just as a professional note that I work at a provider of behavioral health care, we hire clinicians, and we've had to resort to hiring contractors from out of state that are traveling clinicians because it's a tough field up here.
Not surprised. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, carry on, Chief.
All right, thank you. Well, if we can just switch gears a little bit to our community outreach, referral, and education team. This is the core team. It has a different purpose. This is a team that scours our response data and identifies frequent users of the 911 system and attempts to figure out why they're calling 911 so often, and then engaging with them and providing them with strategies to reduce their reliance on 911. So this is a program that's not funded. We're just doing it with existing personnel at this time, and we think it's successful. With basically we have one person that is leading this effort, and we can only manage about 5 cases at a time based on that. But those 5 cases are 5 at a time, so it's a revolving list of clients that are in this queue. To the extent that the clients that they interact with are also experiencing substance use issues, we're able to charge those expenses to the Restore Hope grant, which has so far been very successful for us.
So I'll tell you a question.
Actually, I have a comment, but, I want to applaud the fire department for the mobile integrated health program. I think the combination of the core team, the Restore Hope grant work, and the mobile crisis team really fills a gap we've had in services. That's cost the municipality a lot of money, and I tend to agree we may not see line item reductions, but I think this work is critical and a good investment. And I had the opportunity to visit with the mobile crisis team. They're an impressive bunch, and they are really caring and dedicated to this work. So kudos to them, and kudos to the fire department for really taking on this gap in services that is so critical to our community.
I appreciate that comment. I can take no credit for it myself. This was all initiated before I arrived, but it's a program that I'm very much interested in.
Thank you. Yes, please proceed. Thanks.
Okay. Well, next I'd like to just have one page here with the prioritized list of spruce bark beetle kill mitigation efforts. This was in response to an inquiry at our last meeting in July. And So working with Parks and Rec, we came up with this prioritized list, and hopefully that addresses your concerns. Anticipating a question about why there are no Eagle River or Chukiak parks on this list, I inquired about that. What I'm learning is that there was mitigation work done in that region last year, in particular Loretta French Park, Beach Lake, and others. They intend to do more this year. But this list was constructed in a compressed time frame, and this is what it is. And so, and I think based on my questions, we'll see a revised list that have the Eagle River Chukiak parks reflected here.
Appreciate that, thank you. Mr. Welton, you have a question, go ahead.
So this list, this is your prioritization, or you'll actually get to these and have the job done in some?
Well, these, it's not my list. This is the list that Parks and Rec provided to us. Parks and Rec, in consultation with the fire department, we provided a wildfire fuel specialist to work with Parks and Rec to develop this list. But Parks and Rec department actually does the mitigation work because they're best equipped to do it. And this is a prioritized list. Some of this work is ongoing, and they're working their way down it, and they'll do it until they run out of money. And I don't know precisely where that lands.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Constant.
So to your question, the reason I asked for this list, John, was because in the effort to find money for the Tudor and Elmer project, they identified $3 million that was appropriated by us for beetle kill mitigation and urban wildland interfaces. And so I asked for a prioritized list because at some point, it's going to be up to us to push on the administration to allow those funds to do the job. But in any negotiation, there should be room for give and take. And I want us to make sure that we have the highest priority areas listed so that when we're in that kind of back and forth, we can come to a point where some of those funds need to be released because they really are to save homes, keep people from losing their livelihoods, their homes, their businesses, and their lives. And so the reason this list now exists for us is so we can advocate to the administration to allow some of that $3 million onto the ground to do this work because it's essential work. They're currently operating on the remainder of last year's money.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Thank you.
Chief, I know that we're gonna fix this situation with the Parks and Rec as far as beetle, I almost said beetle juice. Beetle kill mitigation out of the river. Can you, did they give you reason why, just so we could prevent it in the future, of why they didn't have Chukiak even around here?
I don't really know the answer. The answer that I got is that we just did it in a hurry, and
It makes me wonder then if the communication from Parks and Rec Director Anchorage is communicating with Parks and Rec Eagle River.
that issue was raised also.
Okay,
I'll find out.
okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Thank you. All right, please proceed.
Okay, moving on then to the issue of the traffic signal at Fire Station 3 on Burgaw. I was asked to explore this. What I've learned is that in the past, there was a general obligation bond put before the voters for $600,000 to put a stoplight in front of the fire station. That was approved. The traffic engineering department spent some of that, around $70,000, I believe, to remove the unused traffic signal at the old fire station that we had since moved out of. So there is some remaining money. A design study was conducted in 2019, which resulted in a recommendation of don't do anything, no action. Based on the fact that the traffic was at the 85th percentile, performing as they expected it to, with adequate stopping and sight distances, and that there had been no accidents reported through 2020, and we don't believe there have been any since. However, concerns have been raised, and those concerns include, first of all, that the design study was faulty because it didn't address winter driving conditions. Secondly, that the 85th percentile isn't a high enough threshold. That still leaves 15% of drivers who could crash into a fire truck and injure, kill, or cause very expensive damage. And then thirdly, a concern raised by the fire personnel themselves, who have told me that many times we don't respond with red lights and sirens. For example, if a fire alarm is going off, we'll drive there at normal traffic speeds. And what they're reporting is that they may wait for 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes waiting to get into traffic just so they can go. So it's not a life and death emergency, but it is something that they need to get to quickly, and it's aggravated them. So the recommendations coming in this design report are on the next page. The recommended alternative was number 1, no action, and then a variety of other solutions, which include putting in a full-on traffic signal, which introduces right-of-way problems, lighted signs, regular signs, and my favored option is employing our existing technology to control the signals at either end, at the 2 intersections that are nearest in both directions to the fire station. So that's alternative 3 is the one that I'm advocating for. And I did meet with the acting director over at traffic, and we came up with a plan. Our plan is to do a new study starting around September 1st. We will report daily to traffic every call that we go on, which is, I forgot the exact number. I think it's around 28 calls a day from that station. So we'll send the timestamps of each dispatch to traffic. They'll retrieve the video. They have a video camera on the traffic signal on the overpass. And they will begin catalog. They'll look at the video and measure how long it takes us to get into traffic for code red and code yellow responses. Then we'll repeat that in the winter, probably in November. And from that, we will have some actual data that we can inform this decision on what to do here.
Chief Sharkey, I have a couple questions for you from members, if you don't mind taking a pause.
Please.
I have Mr. Rivera first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for walking us through the alternatives and your preferred alternative. So I guess I'm just curious if the data is shown that that there aren't issues, which, you know, I would be surprised if that's what the data shows, because the community council, I mean, this is a top priority for the Airport Heights Community Council. But if that is what the data shows, then how will AFT, move forward with expending this bond that was approved by the voters?
Thank you for the question. My intention is to make the decision based on the data that we collect. But we'll also do it in a reasoned fashion. So we'll try to understand what we're really seeing. So if my expectation is that the data will come back and show that there are delays, and then it would be worth spending the $19,800 it would take to leverage our existing technology. It would basically just be changing the control units of the 2 signals that exist. If the data were to come back and say that we don't think there's a problem, I don't know what we would do at that point. I wouldn't advocate for spending money to solve a problem that doesn't exist. The anecdotal information I have is that a problem does exist, and I think that's where it's going to lead us.
And then just a quick comment and suggestion to the fire department to continue having conversations and collaboration with the Airport Heights Community Council. Like I said, this is a big issue for them, and they're very well informed on the specific details.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
So my question was just answered.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Constant?
So, Fire Station 3 is definitely scary sometimes, trying to pull out. I want to make sure it's on your docket to be reviewing Fire Station 4 as well. You know, DOT continuously comes back and suggests that road is not possible to have any kind of traffic mitigation on because it's an important part of the highway system, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, Fire Station 4 faces the same problem, which is their engines pull out onto a major road that has massive levels of traffic and it's a risk. And so I don't know any other firehouses in town that face that concern, but what Firehouse 3 faces, Firehouse 4 also faces. Please have that on your table. Noted.
Ms. Zolotel? Thank you. I just want to put a little bit finer point on Mr. Rivera's request for the community council. You know, as you kick off this study period, I would really recommend early and often communication with the community council, not only the methodology you intend to employ, but also the expected timelines for decision points and when they can learn what the data collected was. I don't think it can be underscored enough that they're heavily invested in knowing the granular specifics about the study and what the potential options are. So we can at all facilitate those contacts and getting someone in contact with the fire department as we move through this process. Please let us know because this comes up all of the time. And they've had some questions about how prior traffic studies have been done. So you may want to hear those concerns in advance as you get ready to embark on this process.
Thank you, and I would welcome an email introduction to any interested parties.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just wanted to give a little bit of history on this situation. I remember when Assemblyman Honeman and I were looking at this a lot 6 or so years ago, and we had received funding from the state legislature to build this fire station. And we had been looking for a location for a while. And one of the reasons this was chosen because of the centralized location within the service area of Fire Station 3. We felt it would reduce response times and hopefully save lives. We recognize that there at some point in time might need to be a traffic signal built there. And that was talked about when we debated this before this location was specifically chosen and it was passed. And so this has been an ongoing discussion for a number of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant, you had another.
Yeah, you know, we're having this talk with the fire chief. We keep talking about traffic and it dawns on me, since I've been on the body, I don't think we've ever sat down and had a work session or committee lengthy work with the traffic engineer and the traffic department. I think it's advisable sometime soon for us to sit down and meet with the traffic leadership, even acting, talk with them about their methods, talk about our priorities, and talk about safety as we see it. And it might be a public safety concern, as cars, you know, kill people, but I think we need to bring them in so we don't ask all traffic and parks questions.
I appreciate that, even with some of the conversation we had last night, some of the things are on the agenda, so that's probably a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, I don't see any other questions in particular, so please proceed.
Okay, I'll just wrap up on a very positive note. We will be recruiting this fall for firefighter positions to be hired in January-ish. And we're trying to expand the pool of applicants. And I just wanted to share with you an activity that went on here a couple of weekends ago, July 31st and August 1st. Some firefighters from the Anchorage Fire Department were joined by firefighters from around the state and a few from out of state to conduct the first ever in Alaska Girls Fire Camp, where we brought in 25 young women ages 13 to 18, representing 16 high schools in Anchorage, Eagle River, Chugia, the Valley, Fairbanks, one from Southeast, and actually 3 came from out of state to attend this camp. And These, you can see the image of, if this were in color, you would see that they're wearing lavender shirts. They're very cool. And we exposed these young women to all sorts of firefighting type activities, including they learned CPR, they learned how to operate a fire extinguisher, they climbed our 100-foot aerial ladder, they operated chainsaws, they operated high-pressure fire hoses. And while the camp isn't built specifically as a recruiting measure, it's a confidence building exercise. The feedback has been just fantastic. The trooper colonel, his daughter went through it, and I got just some amazingly positive and candid feedback. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, and it looks like we have a comment or question from Ms. Allard on that, so that's outstanding. But how did the girls know about this? How did you put out the message for them to go to this camp?
I think it was primarily word of mouth and social media.
Was it? Okay.
So we had 3 of our firefighters who are women spearheaded this. And actually, before I went to Anchorage and resigned from my job in Fairbanks, I authorized the participation of a couple of my female employees to come to Anchorage for this. They were here too. So I don't exactly know, but they have interest in repeating it, not just annually, but maybe twice annually.
Yeah, if there's some way to, because I think people would just, like you would have a wait list. But if there's some sort of way to get the message out a little bit more, or where these young ladies could apply, or I hate to say apply, but want to join and do this, I think it'd be great, and I would give any assistance to help make it a few times during the summer, or whenever you guys decide, instead of just those 2 days. I think this is a great program.
Thank you. I'll just add on a final note that this was done at no direct expense to the fire department. It was done entirely with volunteer labor. There were some incidental costs such as fuel and things like that, but we didn't shell out any money directly for it. We relied on donations from corporations. The fire union donated quite a bit of money to make this happen.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, just Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also wanted to express my appreciation for this, and I think this is fantastic. Some of my questions about funding and how the outreach was conducted and the level of interest have already been answered. And I guess what came to mind was a conversation that came up about PT requirements, actually during, I think, your confirmation hearing. And a big part of it too is that, and I think we talked about it then, is just the introduction sometimes to certain skills, to certain exercises. And I think you had mentioned that, you had conducted some kind of like training for PT as well. Really helps prepare for those kinds of tests. So I guess since most of my questions have been answered, I just want to say I think this is great. I would also like to see this offered on an ongoing basis, and definitely would help however. And thank you for supporting this kind of program, because it really is, looks fantastic.
Thank you for your comments. I'll again say, I take no credit for it. This was put into motion before I came here, but I'm equally as excited about it. And we, at the fire department, our approach into recruiting will be, we don't intend to relax our standards, but we intend to remove as many barriers as possible, which includes training, coaching, physical fitness, and as many things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constable.
Thank you. It was like the most feel-good story of that week. It was amazing to listen and watch the coverage. And I think there's an opportunity here. Obviously, we want more women to join the force and be a participant. But even with APD or AFD, we've talked about now for a few years, working to ensure that our public service staff represents the community. And so it might be also wise to think about ways to offer additional programs that might target other demographics that we want to see brought into the fold and given kind of an equal footing into the process. And so I could imagine a number of different ways this could happen with different demographic groups. And it seems like a good model toward, not just passively waiting, but actually building a future workforce. And I think APD could also look at this as a model. I know APD does its Citizens Academy, which is awesome, but there might be some alternatives as well.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I asked APD and I didn't get quite the response I wanted about doing something for, I don't know, it's the same thing that the fire department had. So,
Well,
figure
I'm
it out.
sure we can have more
'Cause I think it's
conversations
very
about
cool.
that. So, thank you, Chief Schrage. I don't see any more questions or comments, but want to give you the last word. Anything else?
On September 11th will be the 20th anniversary of the attacks in 2001. We're planning a large ceremony at the Fallen Firefighters Memorial downtown at 4th and A. Correction, 5th and A, including a procession, and I would welcome your participation, and we'll be sending out some information about that soon.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, well, I think we're gonna end up extending a little bit, but I wanna make sure, I think, so. Thank you, Chief, appreciate it, and, we're just gonna try to move along as quick as we can, we're probably gonna go over. But I see Sarah, there she is. Come on up, Sarah, and join us. So Sarah Stanley with Department of Law, and we certainly had a conversation about some of the legal implications of the body cam policy, but you're gonna talk to us about data storage costs.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna veer a little bit onto other costs.
Okay.
So I started the inquiry into the cost of data storage, and unfortunately, there's just so much unknown right now that without knowing the policy, we don't know the length of the video that's gonna be gathered, the amount of it. We also don't know which program system it's gonna come through, so we don't know how that's gonna be passed to our office, and we also don't know which case management system we're gonna have when this happens. So unfortunately, I was not able to get, and some of these contracts also come with data storage, so there's just a lot of variables. So I couldn't figure that out. What I could do though was do a really rough estimate of the personnel costs of handling all the discovery. If we have to, if the files are big enough that our system cannot handle them, which is currently the case with the in-car video. If they have to be burned to CDs, I did a rough estimate of sort of kind of estimating that, the average length of a video, the average number of officers per call, the amount of time it takes to do one of those. It totals 125 weeks a year just to do discovery on CD of body cam video. So that's over 2 people just doing that every year. So we would need over two extra staff people. If it's not on CD, if it's digital, and these are just estimates, going off our current caseloads and everything. If it's not on CD, if it's digital, but it has to be transferred from APD system to us and then discovered, that would come out to roughly 83 weeks a year. So that's still over a person and a half that we would need to hire to handle that discovery. So I know that's a rough estimate, but I just want to get that number in front of the assembly now, as it's going to be coming down the road, and I don't want any surprises. But I'm afraid I could not get you a number on the data storage without just more information.
Okay, thank you. Just, I guess, a question on that, though, that is a number you're gonna have to have before we see the budget in November, correct?
Yes, I guess so, but yeah, I think a lot of it will depend on the policy and on which system APD goes with I need that information in order to, yeah.
I understand that, but I was just thinking maybe there needs to be a placeholder or something in there, just so we.
I mean, I can do sort of a worst case scenario estimate, always if I have to, but hopefully we'll have more information.
Appreciate that. Any other questions from members?
Well, one
Okay,
thing,
Mr. Constant.
I think one thing that might not be to you, might be also to APD leadership, is we might want to see a draft kind of conceptual budget with bounds, like it could be this or this, depending on the system. We don't need the specifics, but this is, you know, my bad for not having thought about, oh yeah, we probably need staff to manage the data process to get it to you in your office and their office. So we might want to see the overall, like a presentation on what the costs look like they're shaping up to be. You know, that'll help us to see much more.
Good point. Okay. All right, not seeing anything else on that right now, so you're a little bit on hold too in terms of trying to reconcile all of this with the policy itself, so I appreciate that, so.
And I think, and I think, yeah, the big thing is just not knowing the program. That's more of the holdup, the program that's gonna be used. As far as trial updates, trials stopped again. So we had trials going for June and July, and things were just beginning to get going. A few, some cases resolved, and now they've stopped. They are on hold until the court is going to reassess whether they can start up again August 25th. And we will see at that point. Rule 45, which is the speedy trial rule, there's been a court order that says it will reset for every misdemeanor case beginning September 13th. So when trials do start up again, hopefully, all those are at 0. So there's 100, so we're starting over in all those cases. Just to give you an idea of the backlog of cases, pretrial conferences are sort of a status hearing that cases sit at that phase between arraignment and going to trial call or pleading out. Usually, and we have them every Monday, usually in pre-COVID times, we had between 100 and 125 cases on a week. Right now, we have between 270 to 300 a week. So we're over double our sort of pending caseload. And that's taking a toll just, on staff and resources in the office. But without trial, it makes it hard to resolve cases. When we do start cases again now, it's gonna be hard to prosecute some of them because, defendants, some are missing, some of them, but also victims and witnesses the more years go by without the case resolved. So that's where we are.
Okay, Ms. Stanley, I have a question for you from Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with that backlog of cases, our your office handles misdemeanors. So what % of those folks are being held in pretrial confinement, if any? And that backlog, how many additional people are being held in pretrial confinement, if any?
Sorry, through the chair, could you say the two different questions again?
I guess, are there any additional people being held in pretrial confinement because of this delay?
I don't, you would think there would be, but I think actually there's probably a small number. The ones most likely to be still in detention are domestic violence cases for people with a history where they can't get out. So those people might still be held, but the courts have also, during the time of COVID, dramatically lowered, the bail schedule has decreased, and the judges and the courts have sort of changed their frame of reference for when to keep someone in custody because of COVID.
That's a good follow-up. So my understanding, and this has been many years since I've done any kind of criminal work, is that it's less often the bail schedule that holds someone in pretrial confinement versus the necessity to find a TPC, a third-party custodian. Is that still the case? Is that still an issue for these folks, or are they the kind of cases that don't usually need a TPC?
Through the chair, you're right that few of those domestic violence cases are there because of the bail schedule, because that's not part of the bail schedule. TPCs are not used as much anymore because of the existence of the pretrial enforcement division that was enacted with SB 91. So judges are much more likely to release someone with GPS monitoring or something through PED instead of a TPC. Occasionally, we still get TPC conditions for some of our most serious defendants, because really pretrial enforcement is a wonderful tool, but it's not the same as being in the presence of someone being watched 24 hours a day.
Okay, and so this delay isn't causing significant changes to that?
It may be causing people to stay incarcerated, mostly domestic violence repeat offenders.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Solotel?
Thank you. Do we know how many of the pending cases are awaiting competency evaluations and whether those individuals are in or out of custody?
So I don't have the competency numbers in front of me, but the trial delay, so when something is in competency court, it goes a completely different direction. It's not on the trial track. I don't believe that the trials being on hold and that backlog is a major factor in the number of competency cases.
So the competency cases are moving at their typical pace?
Yes.
They're not?
They're typical, somewhat slow.
Thank you. Okay, see any other questions?
Unrelated.
Okay,
Go
question,
ahead.
if I may. Do you have any concerns from the prosecutor's office, or any information you'd like to share with us about the potential move of the APD evidence lot?
Very few of our cases have that kind of evidence. I think those are mostly felonies where cars are seized. So every once in a while, I'll get an email from APD saying, what about this case? Can we release this? But it's very rare. So I think most of those vehicles all have to do with felony state cases.
Okay, great, just wanted to check in, thank you. All right, Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Yeah, I wanted to comment by the officers when we did the tour that there is some work that's being done to sort of reevaluate the policies around holding those. That's not with you or your office. They're working with others on that. Is that correct?
For holding the cars?
Yes. That's state.
I would guess that's it.
I would assume so. Okay, I just want to make sure that conversation is not involving you in your office at all. Thank you.
Mr. Weddleton.
So why are we storing cars for felonies when we only do misdemeanors? Why are we storing those cars?
I do not know the policy or the history on that matter. There are some cars that are occasionally seized from ours, but I don't know the history.
Deputy Chief Pearl.
So, through the chair.
Yes, please join us.
Most of our cars, if not all of them, are for felony cases or federal cases. So they're either state or felony cases. And we don't work with the municipal attorney, we'll work with the district attorney's office to release those. And there's just rules of evidence why we have them, whether it be homicide or sexual assault or drug cases. There's just reasons why that they require us to hold them. And except we are trying to work through why the vehicles are there. They've released 2 last week, so we have 2 last, but we are whittling it down, and we're trying to come up with a standard policy that not only abides with the rules of evidence, but also alleviates the burden on APD to store the vehicle. But it's all through the district attorney's office.
So if there's a shooting, do you keep the guns and all that kind of evidence, or does that the state's prosecute?
But we keep all the evidence. So the evidence, if there's a shooting and we seize the gun, we take the gun, we keep it, we store it. It's there's requirements of how long we need to keep it once the case is closed. What happens if it goes to court, then people sign it out, it's turned over to the prosecuting agency. The chain of custody is pretty thorough there, and then it comes back to us and we put it back in one of our warehouses. And for a vehicle, it's the outside warehouse.
Right,
Okay, I hope we're not getting a little off track in terms of our own Department of Law, but Ms. Allard, go ahead, you have a question.
Okay, maybe a little. I just have a quick question. So I was just listening to a case and they literally solved the case 40 years later. And the only reason they solved it was because they had the evidence that they were praying and hoping it was held on to. Is that kind of,
That's one of
I mean,
the,
it solved the case, the murder was solved.
it's one of the rationales that maybe there'll be a new technique that is developed that can better analyze DNA or be able to find DNA underneath the carpet or something. There's just there's a rationale for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are up against the clock. It is now 12:30. Can we extend?
Move to extend 30 minutes.
Thank you.
20 minutes?
How about 15 minutes? Yeah. Okay. For those who can stay, that'd be great. So, any objection? We'll extend that to 15. Okay, so, anything else for us, Sarah, from the Department of Law? No. Okay, wow, sounds like things are really busy and really backed up, but, okay, we get it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I certainly didn't want to miss this conversation, so that's why we really do need to extend. And, I believe we still have Amanda Moser with us. So there she is, okay. So please join us, Amanda, and we're gonna have a little bit of an update or a summary, if you will, on public safety concerns from the conversations that the Downtown Partnership has had with the community. So please introduce yourselves and take it away.
Thank you so much. Amanda Moser, Anchorage Downtown Partnership.
Larry Michael, board member of Anchorage Downtown Partnership.
Julie Sophie with Visit Anchorage apologizes. She was here earlier, but she had to leave and she will follow up with some of her comments on this too. So as we've shared with the documentation that we have here and that we emailed out, you know, we've been having these ongoing conversations about two sort of specific hotspots in downtown. I'm gonna let Larry sort of share some thoughts first and then I will follow up.
Thank you. And although I come wearing many hats, I realize at the end of the day, I'm just a Joe citizen. Perhaps a little more well-informed than many and more involved and still have plenty to learn. And after listening to the session today, recognizing a lot is going on, there are a lot of moving pieces and I appreciate all that, but there's of course still more work to be done. I'm a little bit scripted, so I apologize that, but I'll try to be conversational here. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about downtown safety. As a member of the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, I believe downtown is essential to the success of Anchorage. And for Anchorage to be successful, we must feel free from harm and risk. I will talk today about events and situations downtown where persons do not feel safe. Let me start by examples from just the last 10 days as a downtown business owner. I own Arctic Fox Inn, and on August 1st, a family drove up and they turned right around and left because they reported persons smoking crack on the west side of the Archdiocese. The mom was frantic, saying the family was unsafe. Yesterday at 7 a.m., my staff reported a man with a blanket who wanted to get into the building. She told him to leave, very creepy, she texted. And then 2 Expedia reviews in the last 5 days wrote, not as safe, sketchy neighborhood. In spite of those occurrences, I'm at least proud to say we maintain a 9.4 to 9.6 rating on Expedia. And as a Third Avenue radical, I share huge concerns with my East Downtown neighbors regarding people living and gathering on public spaces and private property. We are pretty well informed on rules regarding abatement on public spaces and enforcement of trespassing on private properties. A specific area of risk is at the vacated OPA building at 4th and Gamble. As many as 10 to 15 people hang there. In fact, this was the site of the murder of Jackie Welcome on the morning of June 19th, when we sponsored the East Downtown Solstice Party. And I get it, tensions and tempers and anger increase as people feel threatened. This is true for persons gathering on the street, many of them houseless. This is also true for property and business owners, residents and workers. Construction fencing is going up everywhere over there, and it's a blight
and hardly a solution. Property and business owners are frustrated and feel helpless at protecting themselves when groups like these appear to be ignored. As an ADP board member, I appreciate our ambassadors, the critical individuals who work on our core purpose to assure a safe and clean downtown. I spent a morning a while ago walking with ambassadors who work with people on the street, housed and houseless. They showed me hidey holes where people sleep and do their business. They calmly told people to move along. They were a presence, a visible sign of security, but they have their limits. They are not hands-on. They cannot move people off private property unless authorized. I think it's unsafe for them to address a group of entrenched individuals who believe it is their right to occupy a space. And of course, when anyone is peacefully enjoying a public space, it is their right. But many people on the street are verbally aggressive, and some are physically aggressive, even toward our ambassadors. And the ambassadors face huge challenges. I am well aware of the complexity of these issues. I understand that we should not criminalize the homeless. When someone does not have a place to sleep or a place to go to the bathroom, then one is not a criminal for sleeping in the park or voiding in an alleyway when these actions are a necessity and more appropriate avenues are not accessible. However, significant criminal activity can be committed by anyone on the street, and we want to see these actions addressed. We love our police and emergency services and want to work toward real solutions so that downtown Anchorage is perceived a safe place. An ask for me is for the Assembly and the Mayor to move quickly toward a best practice navigation center that is well managed, that has differentiated services, that gives people on the street a place to go. I ask for continued coordination between those in leadership of public safety, emergency services, and homeless care coordination. In my work as a school psychologist, we work toward prevention, educational, and intervention strategies. Prevention and educational strategies are, of course, best, less costly, and when effective, prevent crime, significant crime and violence. I ask for greater police presence downtown. APD community policing has great prevention and relational aspects. Our downtown community patrol should not have to be called away regularly on emergency calls. Particular care should be given to larger groups that gather at Anchorage Park, 4th and Gamble, or the next place for community gatherings for people on the street. Safety and security is just as important for those on the street as it is for others.
Thank you. Thank you, and through the chair. So Anchorage Downtown Partnership is a special assessment district. We manage the Downtown Improvement District. We are grateful for the support from the commercial property owners in that space for the work that we do. I included with our documents our most recent assessment, which we renewed in 2020. And I want to highlight just in this document sort of what our focus is to be. And so on page 2, lines 30 to 33, we are supposed to not be a substitution for municipal services. We are not supposed to reduce or eliminate. We are supposed to supplement the services. And I think that there's kind of been a space in the last couple of years where, our safety ambassadors are responding through the Safety First Hotline, which is a collaboration between our organization and ACDA. And we are receiving a significant number of calls that in nature are sort of misdemeanor activity, whether it's persons drinking, doing drugs in our public spaces. And then there's also some other elements of behavioral health, mental health crisis. I'm very excited to hear about AFD and the mental health crisis coming online. I can see that will be huge support to the work that our team is doing downtown, but the frequency and the number of the calls that we are receiving is like we aren't able to respond, and it's getting to the point where we can't fulfill our other services that our organization needs to do. And I think part of my other concern is that we aren't capturing through 311 and 911 sort of the crisis that we are seeing downtown and these two hot spots, Anchorage Park, 5th and Gamble. I will say Town Square Park has, we had a lot of challenges there in 2014, and it's been sort of a success. We've worked to activate it. We are seeing increased nefarious activity there. There's a very specific new group of persons that have been in there in the last few weeks. A lot of meth activity that we're seeing in that space now, which is very disruptive as we try and bring in live music. Up this Friday, we're having a movie in the park where we're gonna have, starting with an episode of Molly and Denali, and then cars, and we're inviting families and kids to our downtown community. We are supposed to be sort of the front porch, the living room of our community, and we are having really challenging, really negative experiences. I will share, a few weeks ago at Live After 5, we had a sexual assault, 1,200 people in this public space, incredibly upsetting scenario. And I think we are kind of here, we wanna, we've had a number of these public dialogues and public conversations, and we just are here in this space to sort of say, this is the heart of our community. And as we've gone through a lot of work this year with the Roadmap to a Vital and Safe Anchorage and this groups of businesses and organizations, there is a recognition of the need for a vibrant and lively downtown. And it is this unique space in our community that belongs to everyone. We come together to celebrate, and we need some support. And especially, I think, Larry mentioned the downtown patrol. We're grateful for the downtown patrol when they are able to be in the streets. But it'll be, each month we sort of check in and say, like, how often were you down here? And it'll be like 1 or 2 times that they were actually patrolling. And so like a more consistent and constant presence would be really helpful and supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question, comment, Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. So I do want to direct everyone to this ordinance that renews the downtown improvement district, page 2, lines 30 to 33, that Amanda referenced, and I of course had previously marked. And I tried to bring this up when the renewal conversation was happening, and members of the administration, previous administration, became offended that I would even suggest that there had been some kind of shifting of responsibilities from the Muni to the downtown partnership. And despite their offense, the practical reality is that we are seeing the outcome of this, and this isn't anybody's fault. I'm not blaming APD. That ACDA and ADP have created a system in which people call them instead of calling 311. And because of that, there's no report. And so then if you think about if there are 10 or 20,000 of these calls, which we're kind of doing our research to figure out what the actual number is. I believe it's more than 10,000 for the downtown partnership. For ACDA, they are kind of sorting through their numbers a little bit because they do in fact sometimes call 311 or 911 depending on the circumstances. The fact is that that's 10 to 20,000 calls a year that don't make it into the 200,000+ calls that happen. So that's about 10% of the calls not being recorded as actively happening in the downtown, which means when APD does their database approach to policing, which is they respond where the data tells them to go as opposed to just them or kind of an opinion, then the data doesn't accurately reflect the fact that we are having a whole lot more trouble in the downtown than is being reported. And so I'm not sure the answer to this. I think the answer the first step to getting towards an answer is let us all understand collectively the data and what's happening before we can move on into what are proposed solutions. And so I've raised this a couple times in the body, you've heard me say it, and I'm kind of starting to play this saw, and I'm gonna play it until we figure out a path forward. And so with that, I wish I had a better solution other than we need to track the data, and those calls need to be coming in to 311 on a regular basis so that APD can have the information in their system. But other than that, I do really respect that this meeting happened, the notes that are here. I couldn't be there, Pete, I'm glad you were able to be there. Because I had a number of other meetings that were all on that day. Amanda, would you summarize the outcomes of that meeting? What did it tell us?
So I think a huge component is Anchorage Park, Visit Anchorage is the front doorstep as guests are coming into town. And it is a very the current setup of the space is very inviting for individuals to frequent the area. And Assemblymember Weddleton and I did a little walk through downtown a couple weeks ago. And it is a very interesting space. It's like they know that our team stops working at 8 p.m. We hear it from all the hot dog vendors that as soon as it's 8 p.m., 8:30, there's just like huge crowd again. Part of the conversation was maybe we revisit the structure of Pratchbridge Park, so maybe turning it into a plaza. We have found with Town Square Park, the more that we're able to activate it, the less that we see this nefarious activity. Also sort of glad that Daryl Hess is here too, another sort of frequent visitor of our downtown community in these spaces, and him and I have had a number of conversations about sort of this activation that we're seeing. The very interesting thing I think about the first two meetings that we had in 2020, both the Pratchbridge Park meeting with the surrounding business owners and property owners, and then the Fifth and Campbell meeting, was there was a strong understanding from those engaged in the facilitated dialogue that there was a need for a location where individuals could go. There was a need for additional services. And that was kind of like through this work, that conversation. Another big part of the conversations from last year was more activation. And so ADP this summer increased our activation in all of our public spaces, and it had, as we bring folks into these spaces, it did have, it sort of lessened this activity and folks moved along. Our team took on 7-day-a-week activation, and now that it is August, we are exhausted because that is working 7 days a week as well as responding to these calls. And so I think that there's sort of like a layered approach, but a lot of conversation about more police presence, more sort of walking through more CAP team. And then I think, definitely connecting with the fire department and this mobile intervention team. Because what we are seeing is behavioral health crisis, from substance abuse disorder to mental health crisis playing out. And I think that's also the scary space, is that, you can call 911 if somebody is committing a crime. And a lot of this is, petty crime too. So even if you do call 911, you are waiting maybe 45 minutes or an hour because other more serious things are happening. But, when you're seeing somebody having a mental health break, there's not a number to call. And, we have the safety patrol for intoxication, but if somebody is high on meth or spice or any of these other things, there's not a service that can assist them.
Definitely appreciate that. Yes. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason I'm making the motion to extend for 30 minutes is because this meeting lasted an hour and we barely touched the surface of the issue. And so I was actually surprised that it's gotten this bad. So I wanted to make sure that my colleagues were aware. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And, I guess go ahead, Mr. Constant.
I would like to call for a special meeting on this topic where we bring together only the members to talk about this issue. When we get Municipality, we get DPD, we get the mobile crisis team, we get partnership and the members of the downtown and the assembly in the room together, so that we can really, and ACDA, really have this conversation without it being tacked on to the end of a very long information filled release. I'm hopeful we can.
No, I agree with that, and that was going to be my suggestion too, to not just let this go, but just consider this kind of the tip of the iceberg. Somebody already said.
We'll give you half an hour plus. We'll match it with a half an hour.
Yeah, so let us follow up with that and figure out what we can do to make it a better conversation and a real conversation. Mr. Presbergia.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with everyone. I just sent you an email, and I'd love to meet with you and walk through the downtown and get more connected to this issue. And I would absolutely agree with my colleagues that we need to schedule a larger meeting so we can fully talk about it. So thank you for being here and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having the meetings and just kind of starting to shed some light on really what's going on there. So appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for activating the summer downtown, activating downtown this summer.
Invite everybody. I have a.
Please, go ahead.
We have Movie in the Park on Friday. We're having a very fun 3-on-3 basketball tournament on Saturday in the back City Hall parking lot. That's a collaboration between our team, ACDA, the mayor's office. And then we're doing a very exciting project on the 28th. We have partnered with Steve Gordon and we are doing a community mural. And so everybody gets to come out and has the opportunity to sort of like a paint by numbers, take part and paint this mural that will live on the side of the Half Moon building. So I have flyers about the mural project, but would love to see folks downtown at these great events.
And the half moon buildings.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap this up as quick as we can then, and we probably have a few minutes for audience participation, because I think we do have some people that were on the phone earlier. Mandy, do we still have anybody? Okay, so let me just invite anybody on the phone to speak. There's 2 people. Mandy, do you wanna call a number and see?
So currently there is one with the phone number ending in 2229. If you'd like to speak, the last name Williams.
Okay, if there's anybody online with us with the phone number ending in 2229 and would like to participate with audience participation, please go ahead.
I'm online. This is Pez Williams with Anchorage Daily News. I don't have anything to add, just listening in.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Mandy, you have another number? And the other one hung up. So I think, okay. Anyone in the audience who presently? You're present, I should say. Okay, we absolutely went over. Thank you, everybody, for hanging with us. This meeting's adjourned.
Yeah.